Brian. Appreciate your work there. We'll now go to item 12. That's the place-based spatial planning update and future program. And we have John Duguid again with Ross Moffat. Oh, sorry. No, we're going to have local board input at this time. Apologies, Chair Danielle Grant and Deputy Chair Andy Baker. Danielle and Andy, would you like to come to the table together and then we'll take you individually? Okay. And members, there's some documents that are coming on your desk now. It's Kaupatiki Local Board Chair Danielle Grant's presentation and also some amendments
At the Building Act, take care.
for the item, which I will move and the Deputy Mayor will second.
You know, like Councillor Lee.
Danielle, would you like to start?
Yep, certainly. Good afternoon, everyone. It is quite an honour and a delight to be here today, and just reflecting on the morning that Andy and I have shared with you. The debate has been very interesting, and certainly just touching on the Auckland planned refresh. I commend the Chair. Thank you, Chris, for the opportunity for local boards to participate. It's been really worthwhile. I've attended many of the sessions, and hearing the councillors' insights and fellow board members has been great. So thank you.
Thank you, Mum.
So getting on to Glenfield Town Centre. I'll sort of start. So Kaupatiki, as you know, you go over the Harbour Bridge, we're on the left. So we're obviously an inner harbour local board. We've got the Waitemata to the south and the west. We've got the motorway, and we're bound onto the upper harbour local board area. So Kaupatiki has three town centres, very much about Birkenhead, or that Highbury, which has received significant upgrade over the last few years. Planning for Birkenhead really started in 2006, so we've still got some town centre upgrade work on the main street still happening in this current financial year. So we certainly appreciate it takes a bit of time for these things to come through. Northcote obviously is a key area for us, and significant work happening with Panuku and HLC, Home Land Community. That's very much around the major upgrade to the town centre and obviously the social housing area that surrounds the town centre. So then that brings us to Glenfield. It has been an aspiration of our local board for a very, very long time, and as actually the Glenfield Community Board have also been aspiring to get some development happening in this space. So part of your consideration today, potentially we will be looking at 2020 for the planning. So thank you for this opportunity. Really do appreciate it. So is Glenfield more than just a mall and an arterial road? Well, we say yes it is. It certainly feels that's all it is at the moment. But really, when we look at further into what is in Glenfield, we've got the Glenfield Library. From an Auckland Council perspective, we've got our Auckland Council Service Centre, we've got the local board office, we've got our recently refurbished housing for older people in the area, and we have the Glenfield Leisure Centre, Pool and Leisure Centre. It's, as I understand it, about the second most profitable leisure centre after Westwave. So it is pretty important, but it is an older facility, and the maintenance costs are starting to get to a point where we're going to need to be thinking about that in the longer term as well. So the unitary plan certainly has created some opportunities for Glenfield. It's obviously a neighbourhood city centre. It has terraced housing and apartments and a mixed housing suburban overlay for the area. Sort of coming into the unitary plan. And that there are certainly some pre-existing plans for the upgrade for Glenfield, but they're really out of date. they don't really reflect the changes in the unitary plan, and certainly not that population growth that we're certainly expecting to see. There are certainly significant opportunities for Glenfield. We want to really sort of look at how can we make the most so that people are enjoying not having to drive everywhere, that the space really provides everything that they need from a social, recreational, lifestyle, but very much an employment base. And really we sort of see as this is a very central part on the North Shore. There are significant populations. Kaipātiki has quite an existing population. We're sort of sitting at about 90,000. We might sort of get to about 110 coming forward. So, yeah. So we're pretty committed to seeing some growth here. So one of the things that we've identified in our plan, in our draft local board plan, we've had about 75% support or strong support for our local board plan, so we're really pleased with that. But we cannot do the work in Glenfield without your support from the governing body. So we feel that the investment is going to need to come through for the council facilities that are in this area. There are numerous, they are within a very close proximity to one another. So again, there is the opportunity. So we want to see the space thrive and do the best for the future. So reflecting on the Auckland plan and really visaging for the 30 years, there was the opportunity to look at the plans for Glenfield, and it was Councillor Penny Holst. And we were sort of saying, oh, you know, Glenfield might be 30 years, the redevelopment. And she said, and I was a little disheartened at that. And she said, don't worry, I remember plans of 25 odd years ago, and that she's only seeing those come through. I think Westgate is a prime example of that. So this is our little Westgate, if you like. We have aspirations for our community, and we are really pleased that it has popped up onto the radar, and we fully support you endorsing Glenfield as part of your planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Good presentation. Nicely put. And members, are there questions of Danielle? Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Danielle. Just one very quick question. Does the relatively recent and expensive upgrade of Glenfield Road in terms of cycle lanes and landscaping, does that help you in any way? Does it get you off to a little bit of a start, or is it quite separate to what you've got in mind?
There are some inhibitors with the development that's happened, because the Glenfield Corridor Management Plan has some breaks in the link. We've certainly got a problem from Glenfield to Highbury or Birkenhead, that part which wasn't actually upgraded, so all of right along Estdale Reserve hasn't been upgraded. It doesn't have curb and channel at all on it, so the cycleway doesn't fully link through there, and then we have some real issues when we get closer up to Papuki. It's one of our deadliest corners, if you like, and because the road narrows so much as you get quite close to Birkenhead, that the acquisition of land along there would be quite prohibitive. So we need to think more about it. We need to be smarter. Certainly the improvements have been greatly appreciated. And I think from when we go from our ward to yours, the little bit at Snapper Rock, between Sunset and Snapper Rock, if that could be upgraded, that would be great as well. It's the bit that's missing.
We'll work together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
I think we'll move a motion of thanks of both the chairs, so when we come to that, if that's okay. Thank you. Great. But relax next to Andy there. Andy, Deputy Chair of Franklin Local Board.
Well, you probably can't relax sitting next to me. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And just before I start, I'll just from a local board perspective, just acknowledge Elaine. I could have done it before, but I thought you wouldn't want to hear from me twice. Look. everything that was said, completely agree from a local board perspective. And about a year ago, we probably sat here talking, you were going to come to Franklin and bring your free-range chickens, and I can't believe you've chosen to go to Nelson, but because you won't have any chickens down there. But well done, and for everything you've always made it really easy for local boards, whatever committee or whatever you've been looking after. You've been wonderful for us to be able to get here. So well done and good luck, and well done, Danielle. Nice presentation. I don't have one, but look, I'm here to speak, and so to remove assumption, really, in absolute support of the item to press ahead with the structure planning, and in particular in the south. And the local board has been, for those that were here, we've been advocating for this structure planning to happen for a little while now, because we're we've got this big jigsaw, and we've just been talking about the SHAs, and I know there's not too many in Franklin that haven't got underway in some respect, but we've got this work and this jigsaw puzzle, I guess, of development in the south. It's pretty substantial. The problem is it's like one of those was jigs, which the image on the box, the image that we're putting together in the puzzle is one moment in time ahead of it, and we're trying to sort of put ourselves together. So this structure planning allows for those gaps to be filled, and it's vitally important, not only to us and to the community, and when I say us as a council, when we look back at the announcement last week with the special purposes funding vehicles or whatever they are, sounds like a Mitsubishi thing you plug in, but that allows us some certainty, and the structure planning will do that, but it's also critical for others that have to deal with this, and I'm thinking health. I chair the Franklin Localities Leadership Group, and we talk often about the health requirements in the south, in Franklin, and this will enable us to, or the DHB or the regional health or whoever makes the decision, to actually have their planning put in place. What I would urge you to do today is to put the accelerator down. It needs to happen, and it's of vital importance. That area around Drury is seeing probably the largest amount of greenfield development this city has seen in recent times, and will put to shame the likes of, well, not shame, but will shadow the likes of Botany and other areas which have seen huge amounts of growth, and pretty rapidly this is going to surpass it. So I urge you today to pick up on it and to approve it, but to also put your foot down and commit to doing it quickly, because it is what is needed if we're really to drive ahead. And we've heard today concerns about the delivery of houses and other things. Commercial land is vitally important for us as well out south. So urge you to accept it, and to potentially, if I believe there may be an amendment, to support that amendment, and really, let's commit to putting our foot down and getting moving. So thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Andy, questions of Andy? Members? Well done. No, thank you, Andy. You're always good. And Danielle, she's also good. Deputy Mayor will move motion of appreciation to the Chair of Kapariki Local Board, Danielle Grant, and Franklin, seconded by Councillor Richard Hills, for their presentation. I'll move that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you both. John and Ross Moffat. Thank you. Members, I will move at the outset, I will move the motions in the sheet that's been distributed, and the staff will cover some of these amendments, and it's seconded by the Deputy Mayor. So it's moved and seconded, and then I will also I've had an expression of interest from Councillor Newman to be on the political reference group as well, and I will come to that shortly. John and
Right.
Ross.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee. So just before getting into the recommended program of place-based spatial planning in the report, I thought I'd just give a very quick presentation on, I guess, just to make sure we're all on the same page about what place-based spatial planning is. There are all sorts of terms for these sorts of plans. I won't rattle them off, but I could probably rattle off at least 15 or more. So we're trying to boil it down to 4 key categories of plans going forward within this umbrella of place-based spatial planning. So these are just quotes from the report itself. Place-based spatial planning considers and integrates physical, environmental, social and cultural and economic aspects of places, parts of Auckland. They set out a long-term strategy, but they also contain some quite specific actions for the short, medium and long-term in most cases. Some of those actions have existing funding, but in many instances they're aspirational, and the funding would be something that would have to be part of a subsequent discussion through annual plan, long-term plan and other funding processes. Auckland Plan is a spatial plan, but I guess it's the spatial plan for the entire region. It's referred to as a spatial plan in the legislation, as you're probably all well aware. And last point there really is that these sorts of plans are influenced by existing plans such as the annual plan, long-term plan and local board plans, but they also influence those plans. So it's a sort of iterative way of kind of looking at a place and coming up with a way forward to make it a better place, in essence. This diagram here is from the Auckland Plan, just showing where place-based spatial planning fits. So this is lifted directly from the plan. So the notion of place-based spatial planning, that term there, comes from the Auckland Plan, although it's fairly commonly used in amongst planners and others. And it mentions in the Auckland Plan the different types of plans: local area plans, city centre master plan, and so on, with the unitary plan bookending on one end and the long-term plan on the other end. So these are just some diagrams here. They probably don't fully illustrate the difference between the 4 categories that I mentioned, but most of these place-based spatial plans will fit into either what we call an area plan, which was really an Auckland Council term developed in the first term of this council. There was a program endorsed to prepare an area plan for all 21 local board areas. So area plans are at the whole of a local board scale. We have structure plans, which are for the greenfield areas. So when you're looking at new growth, future urban areas, that's what we would tend to call a structure plan, and the diagram up there is Whenuapai, recently adopted by the committee. Centre plans tend to be for your town centres and your sort of shopping areas. And then we've got another category called local plans, which is when you're doing a plan for, say, currently we have the Manarewa, Takanini, Papakura plan underway. So that's essentially, we're putting that under the category of a local plan. The council also adopted fairly recently, it may have been just through the local board, the Newton Eden Terrace local plan. It's not for a town centre, it's not a greenfield area, it's not a whole local board area, so we had to come up with the 4th category. So we try to make it as simple as possible and fit all of our spatial planning into those categories there, with the one exception being the Auckland Plan, which basically encompasses them all. So over the last few months, in fact probably since the end of last year, Ross and others in the Plans and Places Department have been doing a stock take of all of the plans adopted by this council since amalgamation. There are roughly 20 place-based spatial plans that have been adopted since amalgamation, with heavy input from local boards into all 20 of those plans. Some were signed off or endorsed by the governing body, some were just approved by the local board. So of that analysis, the most detailed analysis we have is of the 4 local board-based area plans that were endorsed by both governing body and the 4 relevant local boards, and they are, got the slides on the screen here from the report, showing that there's reasonably good progress overall. I think the stats are, in terms of all 4, 12% of the actions in those plans have now been completed within the last few years. 67% are underway, or there's some action happening, there's some progress, either by Auckland Transport or council through libraries or parks or a community group or whatever the action might be. We've got a big bunch of actions that are well underway, but we do have some actions in the red there that are across the 4 area plans, 21% still to start. And that's probably not too surprising, because the area plans themselves had a 30-year time frame in much the same way as the Auckland Plan had. So there are some pretty aspirational actions in there around significant new investment in community facilities and so on that are as yet unfunded. And then we go to the Devonport Takapuna Area Plan, Otara Papatoetoa Area Plan, adopted 2014 by governing body and the relevant local boards. So as you can see, they do contain a lot of actions in there, 103 in the Otara Papatoetoe and 82 in the Devonport Takapuna. So those are the stats. Just to give you a flavour of the implementation, there are, of course, the other 16 or so more local plans that have been adopted, but in general, the sort of implementation is roughly the same as you see on those graphs. So what we are recommending is that information there, the analysis that we've undertaken is fed back to the local boards and also across to the CCOs and relevant council departments to sort of feed into the LTP evolving process. So this map here is an amalgam of those 20 or so plans that have been adopted since amalgamation. It also shows the existing plans adopted since amalgamation, and they're a mix of the area plans, the structure plan for Whanuapai is in there, the centre plans and the other small number of local plans. It also shows the dashed blue areas, so I don't have the pointer here, but you'll see the dashed blue areas, and this is also in the agenda report, are the spatial priority areas that were set through the last LTP as areas of significant focus in council and government investment. We've also mapped the Panuku Development Auckland Unlock and Transform projects, and I think the key point to make here is that the program that we're recommending the committee endorses for the next 3 years is also supplemented, augmented, or runs in parallel to the work that Panuku are doing, because Panuku, as you know, are also doing planning in a significant way. So I guess we work alongside Panuku on the projects that they're leading, and the planning plans and places would lead in a number of other locations.
That's not the information.
So we've also mapped, the little red dots are the relatively small number of locations that we're recommending we embark on some further planning over the next 3 years. So this is the program that we're recommending. Essentially, we've applied a series of criteria as outlined in the report to land at this point. We've engaged, we've been to workshops, Ross in particular, but a number of other staff with all of the local boards over the last few months to discuss their aspirations for preparing new plans and get a better handle on what they're seeking and why. So essentially it boils down to some fairly strategic plans, in particular the Mass Rapid Transit Spatial Planning Program, which is a long-winded term for working alongside Auckland Transport on the business case for mass transit to the airport.
Is that light rail?
Not going there.
To get mass transit on. Can we be
No.
technically
Order,
accurate
please.
about the stuff?
Order, I'm going to call order.
Yep.
This has been well canvassed, and I've invited members to write back to me, and I've never received anything, and we're not going to examine that item
Just asking
right
what it
now.
is.
And
So-
that's a question for Auckland Transport.
Google it.
We're taking a lead from Auckland Transport in terms
Google
of
it
the
and find out what it
infrastructure.
really is.
Thank you, members.
Just tell me what it is.
John, carry on.
Okay, so that's what we call a strategic one, clearly of strong interest to the governing body. Albert Eden Local Transformation Program is a much more local series of initiatives that the Albert Eden Board are very keen on for places like Sandringham and Point Chevalier. Parnell Local Plan, again, not looking at anything big, strategic, significant in terms of upzoning or changes in land use. It's more local improvements and I guess supporting the local board in its placemaking function under the Auckland Council legislation. So local boards do have a specific function to be the champions of placemaking, and for the last few years, as a planning department, we've had to say to the local board that our resources are dedicated to getting the unitary plan through. So there is some limited capacity to assist the local boards with their placemaking functions or function. Most, if not all, of the local boards who we've been discussing with, whose places are on the screen there, have some funding to assist with this work. So we've got years 1, 2 and 3 for the brownfield areas, that's existing urban areas, mass transit, Albert Eden, Parnell, Sunnynuk and so on. We've got preparation for Waiheke and Great Barrier being incorporated into the unitary plan by doing some spatial planning in years 2 and 3. We're currently in year 1. And of course, the next tranche under the blue heading, structure plans, this is picking up on the future urban land supply strategy and getting cracking on the structure planning for Warkworth, Silverdale West Dairy Flat Business Area, and in the south, Juri-Opaheki and Pukekohe-Parata structure plan. So potentially a little bit ahead of the fools in the case of one or two of those structure plans, but keeping good momentum, good pace, and getting going on the structure planning in the future urban greenfield areas. So these are the four, two at this stage, boundaries of the proposed structure plan areas lifted from the future urban land supply strategy. So it's the greater Warkworth future urban area. Within that, the future urban land supply strategy did indicate some staging in terms of rezoning and infrastructure delivery, but we are recommending that we look at a comprehensive structure plan for the greater Warkworth future urban area. Silverdale West, that's just a portion of the broader Silverdale Dairy Flat area in the future urban land supply strategy, so it's not the entire area. And in the south, we are recommending that we look at the whole of the Juri-Opaheki area in an integrated way, but once again, the future urban land supply strategy at this stage recommends significant staging of any rezoning or infrastructure delivery in the wider Juri-Opaheki large area. And lastly, the Pukekohe-Parata area, recommending look at all of the future urban land around that, but again, potentially in line with the falls, there would have to be some staging of rezoning and infrastructure readiness. And last but not least, just in terms of the complexity of undertaking structure planning, we thought it'd be worth just putting up from the unitary plan the sort of technical work that's required for those 4 structure plans. There's archaeological assessments, there's cultural values assessments, there's significant engagement with landowners, infrastructure providers and mana whenua, water and wastewater servicing plans, integrated transport assessments. These structure plans are they are very significant in terms of the resource required to deliver on them, and therefore I guess that's why there is very limited capacity left to do all of the planning that the local boards might seek that we do. Mr. Chair, that's the presentation.
Thank you, John. Very thorough. Questions, members, at this stage? Councillor Clow to begin.
Fairly thorough. So in the purpose section of this report, the first 2 points is to inform the Planning Committee of progress to date with implementing the 5 adopted local board and then approve a 3-year spatial planning program. John, just looking at the map and then one of the other attachments, are we assured that the agreed upon spatial priority areas, which are in blue, are at the moment our priority areas? They are the number 1 areas. I'm talking mainly about the brownfield ones. And is the planning department totally aligned with Panuku's transform and unlock projects? Because they're coming back in the next month or 2 with an important paper asking for all of the unlock categories to be made like transform, in that any land optimisation will be locked back into that area, which has big implications for the long-term plan. But it's also sending a signal that Panuku's saying transform, which is Manukau and Onehunga, and then all of the unlock are what they see as the priorities as far as they're concerned. This is A and this is B, and then you've got the support category and you've got the other category which are not mentioned. So they clearly see transform and unlock as where they're going to put their resources into, and they clearly see they're going to be picking some of the unlock areas because they can see they can be delivered quicker. But I'm not getting a feel from this report that, other than 3 of them where it says, one report, which is report C, attachment C, where it says ongoing delivery of existing plans for Fo, Waitakere Ranges and Waitemata and Mangakiki. So does that mean they are going to happen, bang, next 2 or 3 years? That's where your support is as well? Rather than moving into new greenfield and...
So, Mr. Chair, back to, I guess the first part of the question was the spatial priority areas, and are we sure that those are the areas that the council should be focusing? I guess, they are, in advance of the Auckland Plan refresh, I guess the latest statement from the council in a public document, the long-term plan, as to where the focus of investment should be, and they had a strong alignment with the current Auckland Plan. But yes, I mean, it is things are shifting, things are moving. So through the Auckland Plan refresh, it may be that there are other areas that are identified as the priority. And my suggestion would be that the Auckland Plan refresh is a key vehicle for determining any change to spatial priority areas. But in advance of that, and rather than waiting for that, we are recommending that we use the spatial priority areas and the current Auckland Plan, emerging analysis that's coming through the Auckland Plan refresh, local board aspirations, the unitary plan itself as the criteria to guide us on where we should be embarking on new planning. So that's sort of the first part of the question. And look,
So, sorry, does that answer mean we're actually throwing all the balls up in the air again and we're starting again?
No, it's saying that really through the Auckland Plan refresh, that's the opportunity to look at whether those spatial priority areas are still the best spatial priority areas. So I don't have a particular view on whether that should change or not. I'm not embedded in the Auckland Plan refresh. It's really Jacques and his team and others. But look, it's to come up with the locations that we have on the screen. Paragraph 23 of the report sets out the criteria that guided us in reaching this conclusion that this should be the 3-year work program. Clearly, in terms of the greenfields, that's already set by the future urban land supply. So for the 4 structure plans, I think that's pretty much a given. I mean, the Falls was adopted last month. We're just getting going with the structure planning. So if we put aside the greenfield areas, if we look at the brownfields, and that's the table on the screen, the first one is the mass rapid transit to the airport, or whatever term is landed on. That bit of land use planning alongside the work that Auckland Transport doing is clearly a priority. And the other locations, they're a mix of local boards come up with a strong request and some funding and some strategic things around the western edge of Takapuna and prepping for the Hauraki Gulf Islands. All of that work, again, back to paragraph 23, so it's the current Auckland Plan guided us, and that would be my recommendation, that we should be looking at the current Auckland Plan at this point in time, and any emerging analysis that's coming through the refresh, the long-term plan and the current special priority areas, the Auckland Unitary Plan, local board aspirations, where there is major infrastructure already committed, has guided this to a degree, market factors and a lot of community requests as well. So it's a real diverse range of criteria we've applied to land at this fairly modest program in terms of the number of locations. And the final comment really to make on that one is that we are recommending that we do come back in the second half of next year to just check in on whether this is still the right way to be going and what new locations we should be looking at. The second point of the question was around Panuku. We do work very closely with them on the plans that they're doing. I can't comment on their shifting unlocks to transforms because I really haven't heard about that. There is strong alignment between the places Panuku is operating and the Auckland Plan and to some degree the special priority areas, but it's probably a question I'd need to think about some more and maybe get a bit more information from Panuku as to why they would change the unlocks into transforms.
Maybe Mr. Quinn could answer this. I mean, how is Panuku determining its plans? Are they just doing their own thing over here and we believe Onehunga's and Manukau are the top 2 and then we've got Northcote and Avondale seem to be dropping into the next 2. I mean, who are they working with?
Well,
are they working on different criteria?
The team
because that's our economic development agency.
The team have taken into account where Panuku will work from. If there's any change to Panuku, I mean, Panuku need approval to do things, as we all do, and they're working with their board. But our team are engaged with the various unlock and transform programs.
Yeah. I understand.
These don't represent a distraction from those.
Well, sorry, just looking at the map up there, you've got Onehunga, which is a transform. It's in the top tier. It's one of the 2 transform projects, and yet it's not even a special priority area according to our spatial prioritising. I'm just looking at the map. So how does that come about? I mean, I agree Onehunga should be, so don't worry, Councillor Crum, but I'm just saying it doesn't seem
I understand your point.
necessarily consistency here.
Transform though.
That was,
Onehunga's a transform.
Jim, do you want to cover?
So it's through the LTP. Megan, you want to complete that because I'm going to lose it? That's right.
Sorry, thank you, Mr Chair. The spatial priority areas were considered through the last long-term plan, and so we will work with you again if you think that's a useful way of doing it, which, you know, we do think that spatial priorities are a useful way of helping the council to determine where it wants to spend its money and its time. So at the moment, the spatial priority areas are there in the long-term plan. The Onehunga wasn't a spatial priority area as recommended. It was close to it, but Panuku obviously saw the value in it, and it was agreed that they would do work in Onehunga. So it's a priority for Panuku and therefore for the council. Through the development strategy work in the Auckland Plan Refresh, we've started talking to you about the spatial priorities coming through there. And I know that Onehunga is looking to be, we will probably bring that to you as probably an area to prioritise as well. So this work, I guess that John is suggesting is smaller work. The bulk of his team's work, the vast majority, is on the bigger strategic pictures and the spatial priority areas. There are some small areas here that he's proposing outside those spatial priority areas.
I suppose what worries me through the chair is that we make some decisions and then kind of 3 years later, let's have another look. And in the meantime, we're doing diddly squeak. I mean, and that's in particular, you know, given the response from government, which tends to focus on the outside, and it's similar to my comments earlier in the previous thing, we're talking about houses out in the countryside and basically greenfield areas, but we don't seem to be getting much push towards trying to finish off the brownfield areas where we've already previously decided these are priority areas, they're on the mass transit, take the Western Line, it could be, you know, say Avondale for example, but we're often wasting time through having another bloody report and another planning session, and then we're not kind of actually delivering and getting things to happen. The apartment buildings aren't going up. They're simply not going up in this city. You know, it's not a lot of them going up outside the CBD. So I just suppose it just concerns me if we end up just shuffling the deck, you know, the cards again, and then we end up really not delivering a heck of a lot except prioritising going further and further out, which means people have to travel more and more, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Look, I think we're going to have to pick that up another time, and we will. Councillor Casey.
No, I'll pass on my question.
Councillor Mike Lee.
I think I'll reserve my comments, thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. John, well done, thank you. I've just got a question around attachment C with the local board feedback. So in the final column for a number of, the final column is included in the 3-year program. You've got a number including Hauaka, Orake, Puketapapa, Mangakiki, Tamaki and stuff which say no, investigate further. Have you given those boards any idea when they will fit in? If at all? I mean, sometimes you've said no, they can't because they can't. But the comments, there's a number of comments you say investigate further. I'm just, just by way of feedback, because obviously we're concentrating on the first 3 years. But have the boards had any idea, noting that they're about to finalise their local board plans and things, when that may be?
well, that's our next phase after today will be to go back to the local boards and explain where the planning committee has landed and start seeking that further information. So in some cases, probably fair to say that the board itself was still trying to form its own view as to whether it needed a plan or not. Would that be fair, Ross? Yeah. So in some cases, they hadn't fully. They thought there might be a need for a plan in a particular part of their local board area, but they weren't 100% sure, and so they wanted us to come back to them, and so we will go back to them, but I guess they've probably missed the cut-off to get anything in the next 3-year program if the committee endorses the locations on the screen at this point.
And they're really clear about that? I'm just making sure that that's...
Ross, can I hand to you? Are they clear about that?
I suppose, sorry Ross,
What a fine name.
I just noticed that one from the Ōreki area, of course, has been in for some time, and it was in the sort of last local board plan, and I'm not sure whether it's going to be in this local board plan again. So I'm just, you know, the justification back to that board around something that has been around a long time, I think, you know, needs a bit of explanation. And I don't really see, without opening a huge can of worms, the debate here about actually adding something. I appreciate what you've done and the work that you've done around that. Adding something to your 1 to 3 because I'd like to advocate it and want my council colleagues to support me for it. I don't kind of get that's what the purpose of today is so much. So therefore I'm very conscious that that local board needs something quite specific. If it's not a new idea, has been around for at least 3 years, potentially 6. Why and the reasons behind that. Can you give me some confirmation that that will occur? Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, many of the conversations about some of those inner urban local board areas, and particularly the centres that may or may not need a plan, or perhaps there has been a plan in the past. Many of those are actually probably related more to public realm revitalisation, shopping centre improvements, as opposed to the full spatial planning process that we are looking at, particularly here. So, not that they were unworthy of having improvements done, or funding sought for the physical upgrades and those sorts of things, and possibly the involvement of economic development initiatives and the like. But at this stage, we didn't see that they were akin to a spatial plan, which is about virtually everything to do with the place, including land use. So that's why we've taken the view and discussed with the boards at the time. We said, look, we're not convinced that this is actually a plan you need. It's actually maybe another product. It might be something on the public space. It might in fact involve Auckland Transport particularly, and that we would be part of investigating what that was and talking with the other partners about that and coming back to the boards and working with them and what that item is. We just couldn't see the need for a full-blown spatial planning process.
I get that. I suppose through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just saying please make sure that you formally do go back so they understand, all right? Because I think that's just courtesy and good practice, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cashmore.
The only question I already had, Mr. Chair, was with the structure planning process and the working with the developers, and especially thinking about the Drury area where we have 5 substantial developers delivering somewhere around 23,000 dwellings, 6 to 12,000 jobs, so it's fairly comprehensive. So what, through this planning process, is the actual involvement of those property owners and developers?
Through the chair, in any structure planning exercise and in the brownfield sort of town centre area planning exercises, we engage extensively with key stakeholders and locations such as Drury. The 4 or 5 landowners that you've mentioned, developers, they will be very heavily involved. They've got their own teams of experts in planning, engineering, landscape design, ecology already lined up, and they're knocking on the door in a number of cases to start meeting with our experts. So absolutely.
It's good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got 3 questions. Just one's about structure plans, one about unitary plan, one's about the recommendation. So the first one, they shouldn't be too daunting, John, but the structure plans, in clause 32, it reads, it is considered that a very high bar should be set for the acceptance of privately initiated structure plans, private plan change requests and non-complying resource consent applications to develop land zone future urban and Auckland unitary plan. So my question is, although the development process for land in the future urban may be more difficult, can a private development still proceed through a plan change to the unitary plan and or through an amendment to the metropolitan limit or the URB?
And Mr. Chair, and for the committee, Yes, technically it can, and the purpose of highlighting that in the report, and apologies, I should have mentioned it in the presentation towards the end, was that there is pressure already starting to happen, notwithstanding the fact that the Future Urban Land Supply was only adopted by committee last month, to essentially go quicker than Future Land Supply Strategy sets out. So there are some greenfield landowners seeking to go faster. So they can go down the private plan change path, and the council will have to make a decision whether to accept, adopt or reject those plan changes. But our advice to you is that the council should be setting a very high bar for any private plan change in the greenfield locations that's seeking to go out of sequence with the Future Urban Land Supply Strategy. That's not to say that it's completely impossible, but it is to say that there are significant concerns, particularly in terms of infrastructure funding, for that to happen. So that's the purpose.
Great, John.
But legally, they have the right to progress and appeal to the Environment Court a decision of the council to reject a private plan change request, even within the 2-year period from when the unitary plan became operative. They can still challenge that through the Environment Court and seek a different decision from the Environment Court.
Very good. That's a very balanced answer and thorough. Thanks, John. So the second question is, if private plan changes are to be slowed down in the Falls, how does that intent get reflected into the unitary plan, so the public know that when they're thinking about perhaps looking at that space?
So just going back 2 or 3 years with the hearings on the future urban zone in the unitary plan, there was a lot of discussion around what status or reference you might make to the council's emerging land supply strategy. So there is a reference in the unitary plan, but it's not that you must be in sequence with the future urban land supply strategy. The unitary plan states that that any private plan change, any structure planning should have regard to the future urban land supply strategy, and that's the position that the independent hearings panel landed on. They didn't feel that it would be appropriate to lock the future urban land supply strategy in all of its detail, with all of its dates at that point in time, into the unitary plan. If they had done, when the committee adopted the future urban land supply strategy refresh last month, we would have had to have done a plan change, embarked on a plan change to the unitary plan, allowed for submissions and so on. So the panel kept the reference into Council's land supply strategy as being a key factor, but it's not a... so there is a reference in the unitary plan already.
Right.
And there's a lot of policy around integrating your land use and your development with your infrastructure delivery. There's a lot of strong policy in the unitary plan stating that integration, that sequencing is absolutely critical. You can't have your land use and your consents and your plan changes going well ahead of your infrastructure being sorted out and funded in particular.
But I think that's very... So just to make that perfectly clear, that's my third question, because there are some voices in the community that might be saying, just coming from a different angle, so just so we get it clear with everybody around the table, that they could be saying, look, across Auckland Council, there's significant land holdings that can be readily connected to infrastructure now at the developer's expense. It might sit in that future urban supply zone. So will the recommendation, I don't think that's changed in your report, make much of this infrastructure-ready land unlikely to be developed for the next 10 to 30 years, rather than enabling the development process to start immediately? So I'm just approaching the same questions, John, from another angle for those members of the community.
I'm just wondering if perhaps if we can bring recommendation I up on the screen. Just struggling to find it here. Right. So essentially, just building on what I mentioned before, we're
it's changed.
Seeking a resolution that the council does agree that the future urban land supply strategy should be paramount. So really, just reinforcing that document is critical in terms of any rezoning and the sequencing of the rollout of infrastructure. Yes, there is already capacity in the greenfield areas. Land has already, through the hearings panel process and through the council's proposed plan when it went out for submissions, rezoned greenfield land for urbanisation in places like Red Hills is a key example. In the the Silverdale area, some land there. Whanuapai is coming back to committee next month. More greenfield land recommended to be rezoned for urbanisation. So there's already a lot of greenfield land already on stream, coming on stream, and off the back of the structure planning in these 4 areas, there will be future plan changes in the next 12 to 18 months or so coming to the committee, or certainly within the next 2 years, for more rezoning. So I'm not sure if that fully
No, that's
answers the
helpful.
question,
That's helpful,
but,
John.
yeah.
Thank you. Now, just for the record, it's now item J.
Thank you, it is. Everybody should have this on the table. Councillor Cooper and then Councillor Newman.
So we just questions still, are we, so I can wait?
Yes, questions at this stage. No question?
No, I'll wait
Okay, thank you.
until it's time to speak.
Councillor Newman, before I do get to Councillor Newman, I've had a request from Councillor Newman to be included in the structure planning political reference group. Members, Councillor Newman is one of 2 councillors who represents a ward just to the north. There are always cross-boundary
Parts of it's in my ward.
impacts.
Parts of it's in my ward, actually, but that's all right.
Yeah, so look, I'm willing to accommodate Councillor Newman there, but I'm just looking at the way it's worded to date. It's not by name, it's by position, and I'm just wondering if we can put there a Manurewa Papakura ward councillor, and then Councillor Newman can
Talk to Councillor Walker, yeah.
talk to
John.
Councillor Sir John Walker. I'm willing to accept that. Is there a contrary view on that? No? Okay.
Can just...
Well, okay, can I ask the staff to insert in the I, Manurewa Papakura, I think it's that order, isn't it?
Yes.
Ward councillor,
Absolutely, that's the order.
to be determined. Thank you. Councillor Newman?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just going back to the line of questioning from Councillor Say, and by the way, a very good report. I do reserve the right to speak, but a very good report. Councillor Sayers raised the issue of the alignment with the falls and the referencing to consideration of the falls in the unitary plan. I just wonder, part of the challenge here is that a developer can go to Auckland Transport or Watercare, assess if there's capacity, and if there is capacity within the network, either in the transport or the water supply and wastewater network, that can assist the developer, and that puts the CCOs in quite a difficult position because if they have capacity, So is there an issue here in relation to recommendation, I think it's J now, isn't it?
Yeah. J now.
J, that whilst we give paramount consideration to these matters, have we addressed this with the CCOs? Because with the CCO, it's a case of do you have capacity or not? If they do, we're putting them in a difficult position because we're saying the falls is paramount, but their asset management plan might say, well, actually they have capacity to do it, even if it's not within the sequence of the falls.
So, Mr Chair, members of the committee, in our view, the simple fact that a piece of land and the infrastructure next to it has capacity is not sufficient to justify that land being rezoned from rural to urban, because what about the property next door to it, and the property next door to that, and the property next door to that? So the whole purpose, I guess, of having future urban land supply strategy and the policies in the unitary plan is that we want to have a much more coordinated, integrated way and less ad hoc way of dealing with those sorts of requests, because we do, and you potentially hear this as well from constituents, hear it all the time, that the pipe and the road outside my paddock has capacity, but it's currently zoned rural, so can you please assist with this? So we don't think that that's sufficient just because there is capacity, and so in terms of the working relationship with the CCOs at various tiers within both organisations, these discussions are happening on a very regular basis, including at the executive team level, and Jim, you might wish to comment further, but certainly chief executives are talking from Watercare, AT and Councillor, and Jim and his counterparts as well.
So the only thing I'd add to that, I will round that off with, I suppose, is that it's important we take the holistic view. It's really about one piece of infrastructure. It's usually about end-to-end and the overall cost of that. So we're also very keen. I mean, the future of land supply was approved to enable a clear, structured and signalled view over 30 years. And so we want to, where we can, continue that and to keep the pressure on the brownfields, if you like, because we need the unitary plan to reach its potential as well. So, and across all of that, we need to look at each of these things. We've been clear, though, about the flexibility around the future urban land supplies. If the infrastructure costs are funded, then we work with developers. So, I think what we do have a duty to at the moment, though, is to be very clear what exactly it is we're speaking about, and that's a bit of work. I don't think we've got it quite as crisp as we need to, but there's a lot of work going on around that.
Thank you. Councillor Newman, satisfied there?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with the comments that have been made. I will speak to this very briefly.
Absolutely. Okay, it's moved and seconded. Councillor Newman, would you like to take your speaking turn?
Oh, well, look, just to point out, and look, thank you for your indulgence, Chair, on the formation of the group, but just to point out, I do think that there will be an issue, and it won't happen very often, but there could be issues in the event that a developer says there is infrastructure close by, there is latent capacity in the network, I'm prepared to fund the upgrade, therefore I would like my structure plan, which is fully informed with matters of funding in relation to infrastructure, to be considered on merit, and that makes it difficult to say no, because the unitary plan does not require alignment with the FOLs, it only requires consideration thereof. So all I'm saying here is that whilst I can support the recommendation as set out, I don't want to see our infrastructure CCOs ending up having to be the default agencies that determine whether in fact the development will go ahead, because in fact they do have capacity in the network, even if we don't want to see that development at that location at that point in time.
Thank you. Good. Councillor Cooper.
I mean, I guess for me, I'm not too concerned about the fact that Panuku are doing stuff, and I do think that they're going ahead because Panuku are working with each of the local boards. So instead of our planning unit doing it, Panuku are working with the local boards, and I've seen that in Henderson. So I feel quite comfortable with that. One of the things I am surprised about is Waitakere Rangers have said their priority is Waitakere Rangers protection area rather than Glen Eden, and it's not on any kind of list, which they seem to be, they've been talking about that for years. So are these their requests in their own lists? It says requested or not, I assumed it was from them.
Yes, it is, and we had quite a discussion about Glen Eden and its planning history, and the plans and programs that have been put in place over a period of time for improvements in Glen Eden. I think where it landed, and what you see here, is that even though it's an item we need to look at further, and that's why we need to investigate it further with the board there, is that at this point in time we were not clear and perhaps weren't convinced that a new centre plan for Glen Eden would be the vehicle that's needed right now. The sense was that there was enough in place, that the visions were there, that we needed to go forward on delivery and stitching the place together, and there might be some key interventions around that, particularly with the train station linking to where new housing might be built. So it is something we need to look at, but at this time we couldn't say yes, we need a plan for it.
So I do support this strategy, Mr. Chairman, because we can't do everything at once. It's just the way it goes. You can't paint your roof, do up your kitchen, your bathroom, put a new lawn in the back and a swimming pool all at the same time. You have to stage it just like any household. So I think the work with the local boards has been great. It's sort of been self-identifying and worked through it. So hopefully they'll be happy with that. And I mean, I share my concerns around not enough density with Councillor Clow, but we know that banks are not lending for apartments unless there's a 20% return. And so unless developers are really to basically really put it all on the line and make massive risk, a lot of that money the banks had has been repatriated to Australia, and so there isn't a lot to lend. So that's one of the unfortunate consequences, because it would be great to see some higher density. Otherwise, we'll just have to get on and do this stuff.
Great, look, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Members, there is another small change, and it was just an error. It's in the G, and so we've struck out, don't be alarmed, Councillor Sayers, Walkworth, Silverdale, West Dairy Flat. We've struck it out from the G because it's actually covered in the H. Okay, slight
Read it very
error.
carefully.
Just picking that one up.
Very carefully.
Councillor Mike Lee.
I just wanted to make some comments, not so much about the details of the planning, but the overall process. It's a question of the credibility and legibility of the process, and that it is due process. It is by the book. We are dealing here with spatial planning, are we not, overall? Under Section 69 of the Local Government Auckland Council Act 2009, we have, at much expense and with input of many, many people, the spatial plan for Auckland. This is the legal document which the Royal Commission recommended should last 20 to 30 years and be the strategy for Auckland. Everyone, many people I should say, participated and signed off. We were going to make a strategy and stick with it. And all the local plans should comply with this document. We are aware that officers were keen on refreshing it. But in terms of refreshing, we have to be very careful how far that goes in terms of the integrity of the process. I'm also concerned about the technical aspects of our planning. Planning has become something of a science in Auckland, going back to the days of regional planning and F.W.O. Jones and Professor Ken Cumberland in the 1950s and 60s. It's a technical discipline, and in some ways it's large-scale engineering. So it's important that we be absolutely precise and technical with our terminology, and don't let our terminology be obfuscated by the politics of the day. I think we run the risk of losing credibility if we change technical terms. Then there's the legal aspects of planning. It is a very legal process. It is indeed about property rights, and that's very, very important, as we all know, in this town. I want to get on to the terminology that's been used in regard to this planning, these local spatial plans and structure plans. Mass rapid transit. Google it, members, ladies and gentlemen, and see what mass rapid transit means. It does not mean LRT. It does not mean trams. Now, I know there's a debate in this council and outside of what we would prefer in terms of connectivity to the airport. Trains or trams, heavy rail or light rail. And it's a valid argument. In fact, my position has always been plan for both, but don't exclude one. But this document makes it very, very clear that after the CRL, which is, I guess, the closest we really get to MRT, rail to the airport is proposed and pledged. And we've signed off on that document. And as far as I know, it's going to be refreshed not repealed, and that is yet to be done under due process. So let's not pretend that we've already refreshed it, we've in effect repealed it, because we have not, and that would be not good process. In terms of Dominion Road, for instance, and planning, it's interesting that Dominion Road was one of the key tram suburbs. As we all know, up until from 1906 to 1956, Auckland had electric trams. The inner suburbs, not the central city, but those inner suburbs were actually built as tram suburbs. And so we're doing it again, that's fine. I support light rail on Dominion Road, always have done. Light rail to the airport is another matter, and that brings me to something else that I'm really concerned about, because this planning apparently and this expenditure is to support a business case for Auckland Transport for so-called MRT. They really mean light rail, but here's the strange thing. Mr Chairman, yourself, if I could name you, you have a very clear idea on what you prefer in terms of connectivity to the airport, and good on you. However, that was based on a decision made by Auckland Transport and NZTA, and that was made on the basis of a business case. So we have a business case that says we can go from downtown Auckland to the airport, and now we have to have another business case to say that it can go on Dominion Road or go at all. It does raise serious questions about the credibility of how CCOs and everyone else uses the term business case, because I say that they do not have a credible business case to have rail to the airport, and we all agree with these resolutions they have no credible business case for running trams on Dominion Road yet. I'm sure they'll get one, but they'll never get a credible business case to say that trams are better than trains, a connection to Puinui 6.8 kilometres away for genuine mass rapid transit. That business case will stand, because it wouldn't. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr Chair. The impact of Council's decisions around the zoning controls on housing developments is important for Auckland. And this is because excessive restrictions on where housing development can be placed can hinder growth in Auckland and therefore affect the pricing which we're seeing. So I understand from the earlier questioning that the future urban land, i.e. the land outside the RUB, it will be difficult more difficult for private investors to get that land livened up. So unless they go through, as I understand it, the Environment Court and other perhaps legal proceedings. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. Members, I'll just have Councillor Walker.
Sure. Just want
to... Carry on, Councillor Walker.
How was Jacinda?
No, please carry on.
Cheers. Just want to raise one matter, Mr Chair, and it is an issue that I've raised before, and that's around the dislocation of the planning process that we're involved with and other processes, particularly those that go to climate change, sea level rise, and a far worse situation that we have in storm dumps, and real question marks over the development of locations such as Dairy Flat, which is in here. And I just want to put that on the table. It's an issue that was raised at the local government conference, and I'm raising it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to conclude this, members, there have been a number of refinements on the staff recommendations. The recommendations now before you do have the support of the staff as well. Starting from the top there, the Mass Rapid Transit Spatial Planning Program whether you agree with the semantics or not, it is prioritising that body of work, and I've heard a lot of people around this table saying that we needed to get on with that. There was an indicative business case, as we well know, that formed the decision-making on the mode choice of heavy gauge rail versus light gauge LRT. And now this is the developed business case. So it's critical that our work, the spatial planning work, needs to be running parallel, completely joined up with Auckland Transport and others on that work. So we're breaking that out. We're highlighting that that is a priority. First time we've actually seen that highlighted as a priority for the council. And I think that's going to follow through in our Auckland Plan refresh as well. And then we run down to some amendments, and thank you, Councillor Cashmore, for your input here, and clarifying things in the G and the H, very helpful. Councillor Sayers, your input, Councillor Newman, yours as well, and your participation in the steering group going forward. And I stress, members, the J is really important, a very subtle change there. But we really need to make sure that the sequenced release is absolutely tied into structure planning going forward. It is just, we can't wander off course anymore. Members, this is the beginning of converting that feasible supply of dwellings and sections provided through the entry plan and the future urban land supply strategy. Now is the time where I think we need to start focusing our efforts on converting all that into real places for people to live. And that's what this body of work is all about. Be it area plans, local plans, be it the spatial plans or the structure plans. This is getting to the nub of our work for the next few years, having addressed that huge task of a unitary plan and future urban land supply strategy. So I commend all of these motions for your support, and I will put the motion...
Point of order. Through you, Mr Chair. Can I just...
Point of order.
Can I just see all of it?
I need to take the point of order first, please. What is the point of order?
Could you tell me what I'm voting for in the first resolution? I
can't
listened to
see.
my colleague, Councillor Mike Lee, and I heard the answer from staff, but I still don't know what it is I'm voting for. Is it light rail or heavy rail to the airport? And if it is light rail, can we please have it up there?
John, you're using the language from your team, which reflects the language at Auckland Transport, or reflects the language at our own infrastructure strategy unit?
That's correct, and we'll be guided by Auckland Transport. We'll be doing the land use planning, not determining anything to do with mode, and that's an Auckland Transport.
It's a nonsense.
Sorry,
with all due respect.
No, you've had your speaking
to claim you're going to have MRT on Dominion Road.
Gave you 6.5
really.
minutes, Councillor.
Please.
Members, that's what you are voting on.
So, Mr Chairman, what is the plain English version of that thing that I'm voting for?
It's mass rapid transit. Would it be, John? It's rail, LRT, and advanced bus.
Can you put that in there, please, in a bracket?
No, we're just keeping it as it is. You're too late. I'm sorry.
You're misleading the public.
No, I'm not misleading the public.
Absolutely you are.
Point of order.
Members,
I'm still talking
I'm
to,
just
and
going to be very clear
to
here.
ask for an amendment.
We have had a
please don't
long
speak on topic.
debate. We have had a long debate in workshops and in meetings on
No, no,
the
no.
mode
Never
choice to
in
the
a
airport.
meetings.
There are
Never
some
had
members.
it in a meeting.
There you
There are
go.
some members who disagree
Statutory.
with the position taken by the majority.
Statutory.
Thank you very much. So I'm
Chairman, could we
putting
please have
Councillor
the
Walker.
plain English words inserted into the resolution after
Through you, Mr.
mass rapid
Chair.
transport spatial planning
Yes,
programme?
Councillor Walker.
Is it possible for you to allow those that are interested to vote separately around A, because light rail is not mass rapid transit, it's actually slow rapid transit, and I'm totally uncomfortable with that. Well, it's not slow rapid, it's mass slow transit.
Sorry, you've had a speaking turn.
So I'm just asking if A can be
No, I'm
voted
going
on
to
separately.
put the motions. I've not had this
Take A separately,
raised
Mr Chairman.
before,
Been seconded, Mr
and I've
Chairman.
had no amendments put before me, members.
Been seconded.
Now, I am going to be absolutely clear to members. If in your speaking turn you dispute the words on the screen, you can use the standing orders to put an amendment. That has not been put in anybody's speaking turn regarding
speaking turn.
the words mass rapid transit. It has not been put. I've not heard it, you've not heard it. So I'm now putting the motions. All
Can you
those in
take A,
favour
please,
say
by,
aye.
can you
Aye.
take,
Aye.
please take A separately, Mr Chairman?
By division?
Thanks very much, and by division.
Okay, I'll take A separately. Division on A.
Okay, so for the division on A, I've got Councillor Darby,
4.
Councillor Casey,
No.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore,
Or,
Councillor Clow, Councillor Collins,
4.
Councillor Cooper,
4.
Councillor Filipina,
5.
Councillor Fletcher,
4.
Member Henare,
Aye.
Councillor Hills,
Of course, yes.
Councillor Denise Lee,
4.
Councillor Mike Lee,
No.
Member Namani,
Yes.
Councillor Newman,
4.
Councillor Quacks,
4.
Councillor Sayers,
4.
Councillor Simpson,
4.
Councillor Stewart, 4. Councillor Wayne Walker,
Against?
Councillor Watson,
No.
Through you, Mr Chair.
Thank you. I declare that carried 16 votes to 4. I will now go to the balance of the motions and take them as one. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary, no.
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 Declare that carried. Thank you, members. We'll